Hi there, it's Ann Taylor Pittman from Cooking Light. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am sharing a really fun recipe. It's quick enough to make on a weeknight, and certainly you can make it during the weekend. We also have slow cooker instructions for it, but I'm going to be showing you how to do it on the stovetop. And I brought back the pink Le Creuset Dutch oven that I used last week, which was a real hit. It is really cute, I have to say. So this recipe is loaded cauliflower soup. It starts by cooking 6 strips of bacon that you've chopped up in the Dutch oven and draining off all but 1 tablespoon of the bacon drippings. I've already done that. I did that ahead of time in the interest of time. And I have the 1 tablespoon of drippings here that I'm just going to get into the pot. And while that's kind of heating up, let me turn that down a little. I want to talk a little bit about leeks. So the recipe calls for 1 cup of leeks. If you don't have leeks, if your store doesn't have any, and you can use some chopped onion. I would use a yellow onion. Let me go ahead and get some of this stuff going. I've already got a little bit of leek chopped up, some celery, that's chopped up as well, and some garlic. And you just want to saute these ingredients in that little bit of bacon dripping for about 5 minutes. So while those are going, let me come over here and deal with the leeks. So I sliced off the root end. I want to slice right about here, right about where it starts getting dark green. Save these parts. You can wash them. You can use them for making stock. If you're not going to use them right away, you can put them in a freezer bag, store them in the freezer until you're ready to make stock. So when you're dealing with leeks, just know that there are layers upon layers upon layers. I'm actually going to remove the very outer layer, which is kind of papery and doesn't cook up quite so nicely. I'll add that to my trimmings that I'm going to use for stock. And just know that a lot of times there's a lot of dirt in between these layers. So you want to rinse that. I typically do it under running water. This one's actually pretty clean. I just kind of want to show you, there's a little bit of dirt here on the outside, but you want to get in between all those layers to get the dirt out. Now, again, if for some reason your store doesn't have leeks, by all means, just use an onion. I would go for a yellow onion, but any sort of onion will do. You just want that allium flavor as part of your soup. So I already have some leek in the pan. I've got celery going and some garlic. These are my aromatics that are going to flavor the soup. It doesn't matter, you know, I'm chopping them up. You don't have to be too precise because the soup is mostly going to be pureed. Okay, and so this is a loaded cauliflower soup. Very similar to similar in flavor and texture to a loaded potato soup, but it's much lower carb. So each serving of this soup has 12 grams of carbs as opposed to upwards of 40 to 50 grams of carbs for a potato soup. Now this is using bacon and chicken stock. If you wanted to make it a vegetarian version, you obviously would leave out the bacon. You would saute your aromatics in a little bit of oil, and you would use some vegetable stock. So in the interest of time, I'm going to shortcut this process a little bit. So here I have 8 cups of chopped cauliflower. It doesn't have to be chopped too finely. Again, most of this is going to be pureed. I'm using the stem as well as the florets. You want all that good cauliflower flavor. You don't have to trim away to just the florets. Definitely use the stems here. You can use some of the leaves if you like, or pull those leaves off, save them for your stock with your leek trimmings. Whenever you have those nice trimmings from your vegetables, do try to save it and make some stock with it so that nothing goes to waste. That's 8 cups.
And we have a quick question.
Great.
John from YouTube wants to know if you can use shallots.
If you can use, sorry?
Shallots instead of the leeks.
Oh, absolutely. Shallots would be great. So it's a cup of leeks. I would use maybe 3, you can maybe get away with a little bit less shallots, maybe 3/4 of a cup, which might be about 1 large shallot. Yeah, that would be wonderful. To me, shallots embody the flavor of onion and a little bit of garlic. They would be wonderful here. Okay, so I have 8 cups of cauliflower. I'm adding 3 cups of unsalted chicken stock. Make sure you're using a stock that you really like. It's worth it to try a few brands and taste and see what you like. see. And then I have salt and pepper, a teaspoon of kosher salt. Sounds like a lot, but we're flavoring a big pot of soup, and a half teaspoon of black pepper. Okay, what you want to do is just bring that all to a boil. We're just going to pretend that it's come to a boil. You're going to cover it, and you're going to simmer it for 15 minutes until the cauliflower gets really nice and tender. Okay, so let me change out here. Sorry, bye-bye cute pink pot.
And we have another quick question.
Great.
Could you use frozen cauliflower here?
You know what, you could use frozen cauliflower. That is a great question. You know, in something like this where the sort of integrity or structure of the cauliflower isn't as crucial as other recipes, like if you wanted roasted cauliflower, frozen may not perform that well. But in this recipe, yes, that's a great question. You could absolutely use frozen cauliflower. You just wouldn't have to boil it quite as long. Just boil it, start with 5 minutes and see how tender it is. You just want it to be really nice and to not have much of an al dente bite. You want it pretty tender so that it'll blend up. That's great, yes. Same amount, 8 cups. Okay, so I have some here that I already did, that I already cooked up. And so before I put this in the blender, what I'm gonna do, if you don't wanna do this, you don't have to, but I wanted a little bit of texture in the soup so that it's not all completely smooth. And so I'm just removing some of the vegetables with a slotted spoon here. I want about maybe 1 cup. And I'm gonna finely chop them and set them aside and stir them in after I puree the soup. Just for some nice textural bits, some nice pieces that tell you, okay, yeah, there's cauliflower in here. If you want a completely smooth soup, you can definitely skip that step. Okay, so I'm gonna set that aside and then try to gracefully transfer this to the blender. Okay, I'll start with the ladle here. Okay, so the rest of the soup goes into the blender. Now, when you're working with hot liquids like this in the blender, I'm gonna demo this for you. I know I'm making a mess, I'm sorry guys. When you're working with hot liquids, you want to make sure that you remove this part of your blender lid before blending. You're gonna place a towel over it, but when this is in and you put this on when the liquids are super hot, it's gonna form a little bit of a vacuum that may cause your soup to explode. The lid may pop off and explode and cause burns, and certainly a big mess. So I don't know if any of you guys have experienced that before, but I have seen it firsthand. So safety first. Okay.
And we have another question.
Great.
Angie wants to know if you can use an immersion blender instead of this kind of blender.
Yes, you can absolutely use an immersion blender. I love an immersion blender. I tend to go to whatever you call this, a stand-up blender, when I want something really smooth. So I know I've chopped some bits up here that I'm gonna stir in at the end, but I feel like everything gets really nice and emulsified and really smooth when I use a stand-up blender. But you could definitely use an immersion blender, and there's less cleanup. Okay, so I'm gonna take my towel, place it over here. Okay. Now, it is very thick, but there's more liquid that we're gonna add. With this, I'll put back in the pot. It's still very, very hot, but see how nice and smooth and creamy it is? It gives you thickness without having to add flour to thicken or anything like that. I'm gonna stir those bits back in, and then, let's see, let me turn my thing back on here, just so that everything can get warm. Here I have a cup of half and half. So that's gonna add a lot of richness. It seems like a lot, but again, this is a big pot of soup. That's gonna give you that wonderful dairy richness. Let's half and half. It's not as high in saturated fat as whipping cream. It's half cream, half milk, but it has wonderful body. In a pinch, whole milk could work. It's just going to give you less richness. Okay, so that is the soup. Now I have my garnishes. Woo, that got hot very quickly. Okay, let me clean up my little surface here a little bit. But that's all there is to the soup. So we have nice, rich, creamy, thick soup, and then our fun toppings. We have some cheddar cheese, some chives, and some bacon. We started with bacon. We used some of the drippings, not all of them, because that would be a little too much. It would overpower the soup in flavor and would just be too fatty. We used a tablespoon of the drippings to saute our aromatics. We had leeks, we had garlic, we had celery. Now, spooning up the soup. See how, you know, it has such nice body to it. It's not thin, it's not too thick, it's just kind of just right. And now for the fun part, the toppings. So a little bit of cheddar cheese, some of the bacon, which is always my kids' favorite part, and then some chives. If you want, some fresh cracked black pepper would be lovely on this as well. But that is loaded cauliflower soup, much lighter, much lower in carbs than potato soup. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was it. I hope you learned something new. I hope you found a recipe that you want to try at home. Like I said, this one's pretty easy to do on a weeknight, but you could also do it on the weekend, and we have slow cooker instructions if you need just to buy yourself a little more time. So thank you so much for joining. If you're watching on Facebook, please like and share this video. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe so you'll get notifications when we go live. Thanks so much.